another Fantano clip, him talking about music discourse and it being dead. I'm very curious to see what he has to say about it because I definitely have some thoughts and opinions about the current state of music discourse and what is going on and what the future might or might not look like. It's a, well kind of traveled topic that people have been talking about on podcasts for quite a while now, but for good reason. So I'm definitely curious to see where Fantano falls on this, as he's obviously very much a part of music discourse as a whole. So see what he's got to say.
Hey everyone, Discourse Tano here with the internet's busiest music nerd. Hope you're doing well. I wanted to address a kind of interesting post that cropped up over in my subreddit recently with somebody asking whether or not the general quality of discussion on the topic of music has gone downhill, noting the tier list boom as being like a moment where it sort of like nosedived. And this
yes. Objectively, yes, but why? It's much aligned with the same reason, the same kind of topic of conversation that people have about music, about film, about TV shows. Is the quality getting worse? Yes, to a degree, and for a particular reason. The reason it's getting worse is because the barrier to entry, the barrier for people to join the conversation, to offer their own opinions, to join in the overall discourse is gone. There is no barrier to entry. Anybody with a phone, anyone with an internet connection can get their voice heard, can get their opinions out. And that's a good thing. But that also waters down the overall discourse and effect of conversation. Just like the same way you let people in, you let everybody kind of create music at any pace, at any level as you want, you're going to get a lot of trash. You're going to get a lot of throwaway shit that is not up to quality or the level of what people have come to know and expect from what you be so-called professionals. There were professional music critics whose whole job was to discuss music that people turn to for their opinions because they appreciated it, and it seemed to be much more thoughtful and much more professional, and just a lot more work and effort went into the positions that they took. But now that anybody and everybody can get in, obviously you're going to get an avalanche of discourse and discussion and opinion that isn't to that same level of quality. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but overall it's going to water down and dilute just the discussion in general. I mean, if you can see it, and now it comes down to streamers literally reviewing music that have no interest or no connection to music and giving such thought-provoking reactions such as mid, fire, classic, and then leaving it at that. Good for exposure, not necessarily great for discourse.
Poster was actually also asking those who might be older to sort of like, dig into their memory banks and actually assess whether or not things were better a decade ago. It's kind of funny to think about the answer to this question, especially within the time framing given in the original post, because 10 years ago at this point was 2015, which in terms of the progression of
that timeline got to change. So you cannot say 10 years ago these days in terms of being in the past and like things like music discourse, just the rapid change in the way that we use the internet. You got to start talking 30 years ago, 40 years ago. It seems crazy, but that's literally at the point we are at now.
Online musical discourse, you're pretty far into the evolution of that in the modern day at that point. Like if we really wanted to make a comparative testing ground here, you would have to go back like at least 5 to 6 years earlier than that, which at that point you're talking about the discussion happening on music forums, on Japanese image boards, my YouTube channel starting in 2009, the blogosphere boom, Pitchfork being much more relevant at the time than it is today. We're also talking about a time where generally less people were on the internet too, or at least weren't on it quite as often because we didn't have the internet in our friggin' pockets all the time. Also,
Bingo.
Streaming hadn't quite become the industry game-changing business model that it would eventually become.
That's a very good note, because the fact of streaming is that not only did it allow musicians and artists of all levels access to distribution and a way to get your music out there, it also allowed listeners the ability to listen to anything and everything that they pretty much want. Because back in the day, if you wanted to hear something, it was either through the radio or you had to go out and physically buy it. And you're not really going to physically buy something that you're not already invested in, or that you heard from somebody that you appreciate that their opinion is, or you're just a music head and you just like to hear what's new. But that barrier to entry for listeners as well was extremely high. So you couldn't join the music discourse because most people didn't have access to the massive amounts of music that like professional reviewers did. Just a fact.
Too, it was a completely different paradigm for music discussion and consumption, with a lot of mainstream discourse and consumption still being relegated to traditional media and stuff like that. A lot of the music engagement that was happening in these sort of like small communities online, be it on a 4chan or a Reddit or a random message board somewhere, or a blog or a small up and coming music review site, the discourse generally was more interesting. The music curation tended to be a bit more adventurous too, because generally speaking, the communities around all of this stuff were much smaller, much more manageable and localized. The people who were there engaging in the topic were really truly the heads and the most passionate, and the people who've like, you know, obsessed over this stuff the most. However, I was there, and I'm not trying to paint this moment in time as like, you know, this perfect slice of history when it comes to music discussion and consumption. These forums and communities, in my opinion, had their limitations too, tended to sometimes be very toxic, very aggressive, very dismissive, very elitist. The range of taste and albums and artists discussed sometimes could be kind of limited, with a lot of like meme-based discourse around certain projects. I can't tell you how many times I've seen like neutral milk hotels in the airplane over the sea posted over and over and over and over and over. I mean, look, if at the time I thought all of these platforms and general music discourse during this point in history were like totally and completely perfect and fine and a-okay, that it couldn't be improved upon in any way whatsoever, I wouldn't have started my YouTube channel. I would have just been like, no, this is good. We don't need.
I mean, he definitely seems to be approaching this more from a forum, community, Tumblr, blog kind of aspect, which is, you know, was obviously a huge part of music discourse at that time as things were like really starting to pop off internet wise. I was not in those same circles. I did follow blogs, but I was not in the communities and the forums discussing music. My approach comes from this, it's like the traditional music discourse that came from the big media houses, such as for hip hop, The Source, Rolling Stone for like rock and roll, Pitchfork for kind of that alternative route. And then, you know, you had some big name blogs out there that were coming out in the early 2000s. These were the people that you turned towards when you wanted to have discussions about music, because you might hop into the comment section. You might read something and then go talk about with your friends later on. But they were the ones that were the gatekeepers. They are the ones that were like letting people know, this is the music that you should check out. This is what the music is hot. This is what's next up and coming. Now, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing is kind of depending on where you stand on things. I think it's a mix of both. I think obviously, like he said, giving somebody that much power, that much sway, that much say in the culture and in music and just in creativity in general, while they have no input into the actual creation of said medium, can be bad, because their voice, depending on how big it gets and how big they are, can have a very negative effect on artists and on music, just because maybe it's not for them, or maybe on a personal level, they don't want to see that person succeed, which you did see a lot of times. A lot of rappers had a lot of beef with platforms like The Source because they felt like they were being personally grudged against. Eminem, 50 Cent, like there was definitely things going on there behind the scenes that were not necessarily fair or right or equitable across the board. Now that everything's so open and anybody can join in, the equity is far more balanced to a degree, simply because not one person can have so much sway over the direction that an album goes. Back then, the difference between a 4 mic and a 5 mic review could have been hundreds of thousands of sales in CD sales. It's just fact. So I'm glad those times are no longer how they are, but there definitely needs to be some sort of curation outside of Spotify and determining what is hot. Because right now, there's just too many cooks in the kitchen.
Anything else other than this, because also at that time I found some of the hype cycles that were being endorsed and engaged in during this period to be kind of boring. I thought that there were a lot of great artists and albums and sounds that were out there that were worth engaging with that were being overlooked. I thought that a lot of music discourse and reviews and analysis tended to be kind of one-sided and very top-down. It didn't feel very reciprocal. It didn't feel very communal. And when it came to a lot of the indie stuff that was popular at the time, there was a very incestuous relationship going on between the very small amount of relevant labels that were pushing some of the biggest artists on the indie circuit at the time, the even smaller amount of PR groups that would sort of help promote these artists and push their MP3s out there and give them hype. The blogs and music websites like Pitchfork that they would sort of disseminate that stuff to. It was very cliquey, very cool kids club. And personally, I didn't really
gatekeepers
care for it. So yeah, this time period certainly had its upsides, but it wasn't perfect by any means. And look, some aspects of music discourse online have improved since then, but there have been some, I guess, things that have backslid a bit too, especially when you fast forward from there to now. I mean, I could see why the original poster here would see this period of time, like 2015, as a bit of a grace period in a way, because around this time, it sort of sucks that we've seen the degradation financially and culturally of all of these once great and influential institutions in music reviews and coverage, be it Pitchfork, be it Rolling Stone, so on and so forth. I know that there's a lot of people like that don't really like decry the fact that these websites and platforms, they're not as popular as they once were. They're not cool anymore. They're not putting on the artists that we like anymore. Why does it matter? I'm not interested. They're working with a format that isn't interesting at this point, which, like, okay, you can make those points if you want. However, these places were once huge institutions that when you dig through their archives are essentially like, historical ledgers of art and culture, and frankly helped cover and popularize a lot of really cool, relevant stuff, the influence of which is still significant.
I mean, this is an ongoing trend in pretty much every form of culture and media that is going on these days, whether you're talking about podcasts, whether you're talking about sports talk shows, everybody's going through this revolutionary period where, because anybody with a phone, anybody with a camera, anybody with the internet can hop on and do what these people were doing. Now, they might not do it at the same production level as said platforms. They can still build an audience. They can still build a core following that is tired of the tried and true traditional form, and they can offer something new and exciting for listeners and viewers that they've not gotten before, and readers. And that's just a fact, and that's a good thing because it also forces change and evolution as in a time where things were getting very much stagnant and stale. But there definitely needs to be a form of something, some sort of forms of platforms popping up that find ways of curating and presenting music and all these other art forms in a way that is still new and fresh, but is still curated with an eyes and ears and tastes and opinions of tastemakers that people follow and appreciate, which is kind of what we try to do over on our website if you want to check that out. But I agree with him in that sense that there is a fine balance that needs to be met. Right now, we swung from one side to the other, and I think it's gone way too far one way, and it needs to kind of start heading back somewhere in the middle.
Significant and felt today in a lot of the modern music that we hear, and the articles and coverage of these platforms give us like a really cool insight into what things were sort of received like around this time. And it's really sad, unfortunately, to see these places slowly become kind of hollowed out and left to die, especially in an age where it is very, very, very difficult to have an informed discussion on anything on social media right now. It's just hot takes, quick, aggro, in your face reactions, trying to get dunks. And for sure around 2015.
1000%. That is my main issue that I have with social media and like all these other platforms where people voice their opinions, is that it's no longer about the discussion of said topic or like thoughtful, keyword thoughtful discussions about said topic. It's about getting points. It's about winning. It's about getting your point across louder and more effectively than the other person, whether you're right or wrong. It's impossible to have these discussions in any type of way in an online forum before it devolves into just straight trash and garbage. I don't know how you fix that. I don't even think you can when you give people that kind of free reign. But it's just gotten out of hand. And it's just a hot take machine, like he said. Like, people just say things and do things to get attention, to go viral, because that is what the social media platforms are pushing. So I can't be mad at them for doing it, for playing the game that's literally been set up that way. But it ruins the forms of any discourse possible, which, was at some point present in forums. Now, Discord is one way that seems to be a way where discussions and whatever topics can still be had, because they are much more private, curated spaces for people that are really genuinely interested in the topics of what is going on. But even this, it's like, where's the medium? Where's the middle ground?
There was kind of this like grace period of, these bigger platforms kind of going downhill.
My point exactly, just look at all of these major platforms, Rolling Stone, Pitchfork, whatever you want to say. What do they turn into? Every month is a new list. The top 25 greatest this, 50 greatest this, and they're always controversial. Why? Because that's what gets clicks. That's what gets pushed on social media. That's what creates viral conversations. Now, sometimes it leads to meaningful discourse, but for the most time, it's just rage bait. And that's what all social media has turned into. Rage bait. And it's fucking tiring.
More music discussions kind of going onto social media, and platforms like Twitter and Reddit not being so trash, not being so chock full of bots as they are now, with there still being some music websites and blogs of note operating that were doing good stuff. Algorithms weren't quite homogenizing everyone's taste at this point yet. Playlists weren't so goddamn loaded with AI bullshit. Again, this time period of music discourse on the internet was definitely more manageable, and I think there was like some good stuff coming out of this in terms of like artists that were worth championing and being excited about, both in the underground and the mainstream. And look, current day, the music and arts community, for all of its flaws, I still think is putting out good stuff. However, I don't think this post is wrong in assessing that things are not in a great place right now. However, I wouldn't really attribute that to much else other than the fact that the platforms that this discourse is happening on right now at this moment just suck fucking ass. And a lot of the platforms that people discover music through right now suck ass. In terms of like user experience and what you're actually being recommended and exposed to, Spotify is worse than ever, with again more limited algorithmic recommendations, blander playlists loaded with fake music, the algorithms getting more aggressive in terms of like herding people into certain songs and trends and singles and so on and so forth. Any given social media platform where there's a decent amount of music discourse going on at any given
rage bait. These influencers make content to make you angry and work it. Rage bait. I literally said that. Social media platforms are just straight rage bait. That's it.
Given moment are objectively worse too, in terms of, again, dealing with spam, dealing with crap, dealing with bots, dealing with comment sections that are engineered to basically show you the dumbest and most offensive and most controversial content and comments first, basically erasing any chance of like a thoughtful discussion or analysis of anything happening, as you're pretty much guaranteed to not be seen by anyone once you start trying to do that. Like, none of these platforms are designed to foster or create community around anything now. And as a result, it's more difficult for us to be able to communally have any kind of genuine discussion or understanding about where we are right now culturally and artistically. And to the degree that is...
I love how he kind of devolved into this overall topic and discussion about how social media is these days, because hand in hand. It's tied hand in hand with everything that we see eroding with our general traditional kind of platforms and ways of consuming things of old. Like it changed everything for good and for bad. But the problem is nowadays you look at it and it's like, what's so social about our media these days? There's literally nothing social about these social media platforms. Everything is literally just content farming and rage baiting. I barely see anything social. And if there is, it's not pushed. We're just in a very, very difficult, weird time that I don't really know where we go forward from here.
Happening, a lot of that takes form and shape of these very cult-like fandoms that are super polarizing and aggressive when it comes to dealing with people who are a part of other fandoms. Like we have to be in like this tribal war state at all times. It's enough to make you not want to talk about music online at all. And again, that's the thing. Every social media platform that you use is so heavily programmed right now. It's essentially like a TV station in its own way in terms of what's being decided to be shown to you at any given moment. It's very planned. It's very predetermined. It's no longer this cool, innocent, organic thing, even though it may seem that way because you're not seeing the invisible algorithm hand throwing in front of your face what it throws in front of it. And more often than not, the algorithm is deciding what to show you based on whether or not it's going to get some kind of rise out of you, not whether it'll inform you or improve your life in some significant way. And there's more I could say, but I feel like that is kind of, at least from my perspective, a general assessment of where kind of things are at when it comes to music discourse right now. It's not great, but I attribute most of that to the platforms it's happening on, not the people who are doing it. And I feel like if people want to get back to that, they need to start exploring platforms or building places to do that sort of thing, where it can just be a little bit more organic. Not
facts, 1000%. I'm going to just shamelessly plug our platform, livinglifefearless.co. If you're not seen it yet, if you're following us, maybe you've checked it out or not. Like, we try to do exactly what he's talking about. We try to curate, we try to hand curate things. We try to give thoughtful opinions and pieces about music that we genuinely find interesting and think that other people will as well. We're not just reaching for the most reactive, trendy shit. We're trying to have real discussions. And I think that it's time. I think people are tired of the discussions that are going on. I think it's time that people are starting to shift back and look for places where they can find genuine interest and conversations about the things they love without it turning and evolving into these rage bait, bot comment farms, like whatever that is going on all of these platforms. And I hope there's going to be many more places popping up like that. But if you look for a place right now, Live My Fears, go check us out.
So heavily controlled or botted or whittled down to the most dumb and baseline and aggressive aspects of it. Like, regardless of where music discourse is happening, those elements are always going to be there, but it really needs to be like balanced. Now, look, that's not to say that there aren't like bright spots in the music discourse world now, that there aren't, still websites like Stereo Gum doing their thing. There aren't community-based review platforms that are most definitely worthy of respect, like Rate Your Music and Sputnik and Album of the Year. Music discourse isn't currently in such a bad place that it's all terrible and it's all awful and it's all garbage. But in my opinion, a great deal of it is kind of being taken up and ruined by the social media platforms where nothing good is happening. And if it's to ever get back into a place where it's in a much healthier state, I think a lot of actual, passionate, genuine music fans maybe need to start building and creating another place to do this sort of thing. Seek out alternatives where a majority of the conversation isn't just simply like, fighting with each other over chart positions and other random bullshit. But
yeah, I mean, that's it. It's the only way to kind of really break free from this is to break free from the platforms and the hold that they have on us and just our culture in general. There's no reason that these platforms should have such a large space in terms of conversation, discussion, and culture. It's bad. It's just bad. It's uncategorically bad, and you can see where it's led us. Music discourse is terrible, not because, like I said, people don't have opinions or thoughtful or thoughtful discussions about what's happening is because social media platforms pretty much do not allow it in any meaningful way. So I agree with him 1000%, man. Like 1000%, I agree with Fantano on that. Very, very poignant points.